Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got a returning guest, and he's got his buddy with him from the podcast that wasn't here last time. We'll have Daniel with us with Ernie. But before we introduce these guests, we're going to introduce the Rejects. Julia, what is going on? How are you?
What's up? Thanks for having me, Nick. It's a beautiful day in the occult neighborhood. And I'm really excited for this one. The topic sounds super interesting. Cosmic Peach Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. Always appreciate you on the show, Julia. And we got my boy Tyrone. What is going on, sir?
What's going on, everybody? Hey, man, appreciate you for letting me come on here again. I'm ready for this great knowledge. Everything that you want to learn about me is on my website, rebirthoftheword.com. You can also buy my book, Journey Through the Origins of History, through Amazon. It was a bestseller. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it, man.
Oh, hell yeah, of course. Thank you. And we got one of Tyrone's boys, his boy Fear. He came on the show with us. He's going to join us today. We're going to see what's up. What is going on, Fear? How are you?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. I believe I was on an episode about 3 months ago. Tyrone was supposed to be on, but his system wasn't having it that day. So I jumped in on there because I was commenting in on in the chat box, and Danielle invited me on. So I thank you for that. And but yeah, glad to be back.
Yeah, and you have a show of yourself. Did you have your own show too, or?
Yeah, it's called Rocks, Ruins, and Recipes. Basically, I go over ancient civilizations, the temples, the megalithic structures that they used to worship at, the tools that they used. And I also, as a cook, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. But I'm a trained chef, so I'm taking a recipe that civilization's most known for and also working that into the episodes as well.
Yo, was it you who I think I heard on? I could be wrong. Was it you I heard on Tyrone's show? You have a name for this cookbook or something that you're going to come out with?
Yes, Disobedience.
Yeah, I heard that shit. I heard you say that on his. That's you. Okay, same guy. I heard you say that shit on his fucking Twitter, whatever is live, and I was like, yo, this fucking guy's funny. Nice. That's awesome. Disobedience. All right, yeah. Well, thank you very much. Your name, man. We call you Fear or what?
Yeah, well, my real name's Trevor, but you can call me Fear.
All right, I'll call you either. All right, thank you very much, sir. And Daniel from Virginia's for Conspiracy Lovers podcast. What is going on, sir?
How's it going, everybody? Thanks for having us.
Of course. You want to plug the show? You want to say anything about? You want to advertise anything?
Yeah, well, I'll let Ernie do most of the plug-in of the show.
Oh, okay.
This was sort of his brainchild after I had to endure. I don't know. We first met quite a few months of him just slinging all sorts of information in my direction about things that, I kind of thought were a little bit crazy at the beginning. And as we got to become really friends, we got more in depth with a lot of these different topics that he was talking about. And at some point he had this idea to have this show. He said, hey, I got this idea, Virginia's for Conspiracy Lovers, where we just talk about conspiracies that are sort of based in Virginia, but also a little bit of lesser known, I guess you might say, history of Virginia, which there's lots of that. We're not probably one of the states with a lot of history, which goes without saying. But Ernie is a specialist in specifically things that are sort of conspiratorial. And we wanted to talk about some of the stuff that is less known. You don't come across in textbooks if you're taking a course on Virginia history, for example. So that's sort of where we started. And my background is I've got my master's in history, and I taught history and international relations for a little while.
Oh, nice.
But this is a lot of this stuff that Ernie has brought to my attention is sort of, I don't think flies in the face of traditional history is the right way to put it, but there are a lot of alternative views or lesser known facts or maybe different angles that are not traditionally accepted by the mainstream, which I'm open to and curious about. And I like to hear these theories. And then we sort of have these conversations about, well, this is what I heard, or this is what I read. And how does that fit with the traditional narrative? And then that's where that dialogue sort of kicks off. So
it's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah. Daniel's the learned skeptic, and I'm the psycho who like scribbles crap out like a serial killer.
That's why I got Lisa and Ricardo on the show. people. Let's make up for all the fucking crazy ones.
So yeah, just real quick, because I'm a moron and set up all the socials for the podcast, they're all different names. I'm an idiot. So YouTube is VA Con Lovers Podcast, all one word. Instagram is Virginia Conspiracy Lovers, all one word. And then the Facebook is Virginia's for Conspiracy Lovers. And then obviously Virginia's for Conspiracy Lovers. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are. And our YouTube, we do try to include a lot of visuals. And when you got a guy as good looking as Daniel on the show, you gotta do video. He's like, you can't tell, but he's like 9 feet tall. He's like this Nordic smart. There's the huge discrepancy between the hosts. So, but
well, that's how we met on this VA Con Lovers thing, because I'd just gotten out of prison and I thought, well, I'm looking for some companionship, and that's how. But I didn't realize it was about conspiracies. I got confused, and that's how this whole thing started.
Yo, did you ever see that shit? Only because this is sad. I have experience in prison. They actually have like you know what I'm talking about, right, Ernie? You know what I was gonna bring up?
Yeah.
They actually have like fucking bitches you can fucking like write letters to.
Yeah. He didn't know until after the
lovers.
fact that I think he said it out loud and was like, "Oh, wait a minute, this might get different attention than we intended." But it's
hey,
all
I'll
part
take
of
it
the
though,
fun.
man. They got a lot of time on their hands, man. They can.
Funny. I'm glad you know.
We enjoy a good sense of humor. So.
That's great. That's great.
Well, so I guess, do you want so everybody listened to me ramble like a psycho on the last time about weird crap at William and Mary and all these like alignments and measurements and stuff, and then right when I got to the point where I was going to share the screen, everything got glitchy as hell, and it wouldn't pull up. So I threw together a slideshow, and I can burn through that really, really quick before we get into like what we were going to talk about today, just so there's a record out there that I'm not making it up. So I've got it down here in the
awesome. Yes.
Do you mean
bringing his receipts from last time?
Yeah.
Strange measurements at William and Mary.
Yeah,
Julie, were you here for the first one? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
First time I'm hearing about it.
No, I don't think I was actually.
All right, so this should be pretty interesting for you.
Okay, so I'm gonna burn through this really, really quick. Everybody heard it, and except for Julia. So really quick, we went through the history of William and Mary, its esoteric roots, its Masonic roots, and whatnot. And back to Francis Bacon. I mean, this piece of land right here is the beginning of this country, bought from Captain John Page, who comes from the Pajam family, which comes from southern France, which will actually tie in a little bit to what we're going to talk about today, because everybody in southern France was, depending on what time you were there, you were either Merovingian, Huguenot, Stuart, Carolinian, like of Charlemagne, Plantagenet. I mean, the south of France. Yeah, I've got a little bit on there. So they bought this piece of land from that guy, got a charter for the college. There's tons of my overarching, as I get into this more and work on it, my overarching kind of thesis about Virginia itself is that it is, and this country in general was, at least, if not still, it was sort of a breakaway civilization for the Stuart dynasty. And by way of the Stuarts, the Merovingian dynasty that claims the divine right to kings through the supposed Christ and Magdalene bloodline, which is old hat and kind of like conspiracy cliche. And a bunch of parts of that have been like debunked since the whole Dan Brown thing. And I'm not espousing that those bloodlines are necessarily true, but I think that they use that kind of mythology to imbue their bloodline with this divine right to rule. so that they could stay in power. You give yourself this big mythology behind your family name, and then we're chosen by God. And even in the stuff we're going to talk about today, I'll burn through a little history before we get into the story, and you can see this through line all the way from the Merovingian bloodline, or the Merovingian dynasty, all the way up through the Stuarts into the Jacobites and the founding of the New World. Anyway, all this stuff happened right in Williamsburg, Virginia. Kicked off there with James Fort, and then the college built in 1693, oldest college, home of the very first collegiate secret society, created the Greek letter system at William and Mary. One of the oldest Masonic lodges, the number 6 lodge in Williamsburg, is a block away from here. The Rockefellers swooped in the 1920s and turned Williamsburg into a living museum that you can't do an archaeological dig in without the express written consent of the Rockefeller Foundation, who has a lawyer who lives in Williamsburg to handle that ever since the 1920s. And they swooped in from Stratford upon Avon, where they were doing the same thing right after Manly P. Hall's wife, Marie Bauer Hall, came out with this theory where she had decoded a bunch of Shakespeare, Francis Bacon works, and tombstones in the Bruton Parish churchyard about a block away from here, and claimed that there was a vault buried underneath the bell tower of the original Bruton Parish church, and it was 20 feet below the earth, 20 feet wide by 20 feet deep, and that there was something in there having to do with Bacon, Shakespeare, possibly Nathaniel Bacon of Bacon's Rebellion, but something having to do with Bacon and that milieu that was super important. There's even a friggin' cult that comes from the West Coast called the Sages of the Seventh Seal, who in the 90s jumped the fence of the Bruton Parish churchyard and dug up the cemetery in the middle of the night. And Marie Bauer Hall has made like pilgrimages to Williamsburg to like fight to have this like area excavated, and they've never been able to do it because of the Rockefellers. Anyway, so that's a little bit of preamble about how weird this little town is that you really kind of never hear about, other than like the fake plastic history part of it, which has been kind of built by the Rockefellers to a certain degree.
So do you think there's something really buried there, and that's why the Rockefellers won't let anybody excavate it?
I think that just like Oak Island, and you'll see I'm about to show some really interesting connections with Oak Island, that in the past there were several areas around the globe that were almost, for want of a better term, safety deposit boxes for things like Jacobite revolutions, the spirited away Templar treasures, the spirited away crown jewels of France, things to fund revolutions and rebellions and stuff like that, pirate booty, stuff like that. There were these places that adepts knew about, and I believe that Williamsburg could possibly be one of those places. Oak Island is another one of those places. I think there's markers all over this country that point to these places for people who are in the know to know. But at this point, no, I think whatever may have been there is gone. Court Lindahl has a really great theory that, and he's done some further work on top of what Marie Bauer Hall started so many years ago. And he's an archaeologist, and he points more towards that it might be the body of Nathaniel Bacon, who started a revolution in Williamsburg. This guy was his grandfather was Sir Francis Bacon's uncle. And he had the same life trajectory almost as Francis Bacon, in that, he's born to a fairly known noble family. He goes to school at Cambridge. He does a tour of Europe with literally one of the founders of the Royal Society, and then he ends up at Gray's Inn, the same law school that all the elites went to, the same law school that Francis Bacon went to. So he was, and then marries a noblewoman in like 1773. So he's like set up in England to be the shit. And then all of a sudden in 1674, he up and decides that he's going to move him and his new noblewoman wife out to Podunk, nowhere, New World, Virginia, and grow corn and tobacco. And then by 1676, he has led a revolution, taken over the government. He's got the colonial governor of Virginia hiding on a boat in the Chesapeake Bay. He's completely taken over the government, and then he dies of dysentery, and they never find the body because his followers hid it somewhere, most likely to keep his body from being desecrated, like, a couple decades later, the way they did with Blackbeard, where they cut his head off, hung it in front of the, in Chesapeake Bay, and then walked it up and down this street right here. And then it was turned into a silver punch bowl at the Masons, at the tavern where the Masons and the Phi Beta Kappa was created in Williamsburg. So that was a bunch of random Virginia. I always feel like I got to give everybody the like Virginia Williamsburg rundown before I get into it, but it's so much.
It's really fascinating to me. I've actually done, maybe you have too, since you've looked into the Grail lore stuff, but I've actually done a lot of research, and a lot of people think Francis Bacon and Shakespeare are the same person.
100%. Yeah, I subscribe.
If you guys want to get out of here anytime tonight, don't get him started on that. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Otherwise,
That's
we're
my
going to
bad.
be here 24 hours.
I'll just say real
My
quick.
bad.
I'll make it worse too, because there's
Yeah.
so much stuff about that I can even.
I
subscribe
subscribe to Shakespeare. Is Shakespeare by committee. Francis Bacon had a literary society called the Society of the Helmet, which literally membership contained every single person that historians, anybody who doesn't think that Shakespeare was the actual author, all the people that they put up as possibilities of authorship for Shakespeare, all those people were part of Francis Bacon's literary society called the Society of the Helmet, named after the goddess Athena, who shook her spear her spear of knowledge in the face of ignorance. And I mean, specifically the 17th Earl of Oxford definitely wrote some of the plays. In modern day, they found 2 plays in the Oxfordian library, like in a portfolio, that are rough drafts of 2 Shakespeare plays with different names, but they're the exact same play.
And maybe the least known work of Shakespeare could possibly be the Bible.
Yeah, that was definitely the 1611 Bible. I think what's really interesting is that so the 1611 Bible comes out in 1611. That was definitely under Francis Bacon's purview. Again, officially, he was the guy who kind of farmed out the different books to different people to translate, and then he kind of compiled it. And that's why you find really interesting things in the in the King James Bible, such as Psalm 46. If you count 46 words from the first word of Psalm 46 down, you end up at the word shake. And then if you count 46 words up from the last word of Psalm 46, you end up with spear. Both spear and shake, those 2 words are not used in the translation for other synonyms that mean shake or spear. They use the word lance and pike and things like that all over the King James Bible, but specifically they use shake and spear, and they also use shake like all these other different synonyms all over the Bible for the word shake, but in that one they don't. But what's interesting,
I'm glad we're on the same. I'm glad we're on the same page as that, because you were talking about it And in the back of my head, I was thinking like, well, they're probably the same Shakespeare,
Absolutely.
Francis Bacon, they're probably the same person. Well, another part of the Grail lore that reminds me of what you're talking about with this area right here is that Pope, I think in France or somewhere, he found something buried under that church that he was in charge of, and he became like a millionaire overnight. And
Rennes Chateau.
Rennes Chateau.
Yeah.
Yes,
This-
it kind of reminds me of that.
That all kind of runs into the same people and the same ideas you're talking about.
Does it really?
Yeah. Merovingian,
Wow.
again, from the Merovingians to the Carolinians to the Plantagenets to the Templars to the Stuarts up to the Jacobites and America. And there's a line of succession from ancient mystery schools to the Merovingians up through the Crusades and the Assassins and the Templars into the Rosicrucians, into the Royal Society and the Invisible College, and then finally Freemasonry and then the different arms that came off of that.
Well,
Let
I'm
me get
tracking with you. I'm
we haven't
tracking with
discussed
you.
before. Was that the brief period of time where the papacy was moved to France for that very brief period of time?
I think that was the Rennes Chateau. I mean, it has a long history, but the priest who he found supposedly some documents inside a Byzantine statue that was on the abbey, like at the abbey in at Rennes Chateau. And I want to say he was like, that happened in like the 1800s.
Yeah, it did.
So it was modern day papacy, but who knows where. But like, shit, I had a point.
He died funny too.
Yeah, he also had a girlfriend who lived like on the property, and like
right.
he rebuilt the whole town of Rennes Chateau. He
would throw like lavish parties and stuff.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
it was
put in
weird.
Like big aquifers and like got running water to the whole town. And he completely, like the abbey at Rennes Chateau is covered in gold and jewels and silver and stuff. And none of it was like that until after he became the priest of this little abbey in kind of nowhere outskirts of France. And then one day he almost has a parallel story to the Templars in that they went over to the Crusades, ended up on the Temple Mount, camping out on the Temple Mount, dug underneath it for like a year, and then just up and left and went to go see the Pope. And then from that point on, the Pope put out a papal bull saying, these guys are made men. They answer to no one but God and me. They pay no taxes. They have no allegiance to anybody except for God and me. Well, this guy in the 1800s, he just up and goes and gets an audience with the Pope, which is harder than people think, even for a priest. And after that, he's like the wealthiest like priest on earth. And you can still go to the abbey and you can see the kind of fruits of that. And nobody really knows where that money came from. But let's look at some of these because I'm going to take up all the time talking nonsense, man. So in the last time I was on here, I talked about this is the original. I don't know how I did that.
I did that.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah.
I don't know how to switch. Oh, I see. All right. So this triangle represents the original property of the historic campus. Everything from this baseline down was pasture land and woods. And I noticed that it had an interesting shape, so I started measuring it and comparing it against the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it's an exact encode of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And you might be thinking like this line here is kind of weird because it kind of goes right up against this building here. The oldest map that we have of Williamsburg is the Frenchman's map from 1740. And this road right here doesn't have this little bump out back then. It went right up against this house. So this was the original kind of road line. Also, these two roads here are the oldest roads in the country. This is Jamestown Road. that goes all the way to the Jamestown Fort. And then this is Richmond Road that runs all the way from here all the way to the second settlement in Virginia, which was at the falls of the James River in Richmond. So these are very old roads. Specifically, they put this college on this land in between these two roads. So you measure these. This is from the apex down. That is the exact measurement of the side of the Great Pyramid of Giza. From here down to the base, it's the exact same length. The base is the exact same length. What's really cool is from the apex to right here, which is now the bell tower of the Christopher Wren building, named after the co-founder of the Royal Society, Sir Christopher Wren. Supposedly he designed it, but at the very least it was designed with him in mind. So from this point to the bell tower is the exact measurement. If you were standing if you could somehow stand on the floor of the Great Pyramid of Giza and measure straight up to the capstone, that's the exact measurement of that. And what's really interesting is that this hasn't always been a bell tower. Originally, when the building was built, it was the New World's first astronomical observatory. So that was literally the place where learned people would be able to navigate and survey and be able to create a line that goes all the way across the globe and lands directly on the Great Pyramid of Giza. And not only does it land on the Great Pyramid of Giza, it runs exactly down the exact same side as it does back here at the William and Mary Pyramid. What's really interesting.
I just want to say something real quick.
Yeah.
You said that was an observatory, right? Correct?
Yeah. Astronomical observatory.
I just want to add in, I'm covering Tycho Brahe, and he was huge. I mean, basically Kepler used all this shit. That guy built his own stuff. He actually changed things. The guy's a huge impact actually on astrology and all this stuff, seeing this shit. And when he built his observatories, I kind of knew he was into alchemy to an extent, so I was going to cover him on the show. But I started really trying to look into his observatories, because I was just I really want to see what the fuck's going on in there. Eventually you go through enough academic paperwork, so you find some details. This guy's place was actually designed. They had talismans on the wall. The way the outside of the garden was done, their flower beds were done in planetary energies. This whole place was built with occult ideas behind it. So I'm just saying, I mean, probably the same thing with this one.
Wait till I get to the Tetractys, which is something that I'd never heard of before, and falls right in line with the Kabbalistic tree of life. And lays, we'll get to it. So anyway, this pyramid, this was the first, I think this was the first kind of alignment they built into the landscape. Might have been a happy accident. These, they put a school on a piece of land that was in between two roads that come to a point. That could have been a coincidence, but the fact that it points straight to the Great Pyramid of Giza, there's no possible way. If you put this line, the end of this line, on any of the other pyramids or the Sphinx, it does not line up and run into this apex perfectly like this. So there's that. Once I found that, I was watching a lot of The Curse of Oak Island, and a really brilliant guy came on there named Petter Almundsen, this Nordic dude, probably one of Daniel's cousins. And he found a tree of life configuration on the island, and they actually had him come to the island, and they kind of walked it out. And at several of the points where the Sephiroth would land, they actually found really significant finds. So I was like, well, let me see if I can find something like that at William and Mary. And just, you can see with an overhead view of the campus, they have tree of life configuration has been built into so many different cityscapes. And I see people kind of try to shoehorn them in, and none of them are as perfect as the one at William and Mary. None of them.
I think that's funny. Shoehorn him in because I'm an occultist, and I've seen some people like,
yeah, they're like a little cockeyed and like they're like, yeah. This one is perfect. And when you find out that this is the original building, the sunken garden here, and then these 6 buildings, the rock garden here, and then the Creme del Pond. The Creme del Pond is the original. That's the end of the creek that the original 1607 mission to the New World. That's the end of the first creek that they went up. It's called College Creek now, but it used to be called Archer's Hope until the 1920s. When the Rockefellers came in, it was called Archer's Hope because Sir Gabriel Archer, the big swinging dong of the 1607 mission, he was adamant that this be where the James Fort be put, but they decided against it. The creek wasn't deep enough to turn the boats around, but they called it Archer's Hope in honor of him for forever. And then also on top of that, they in 2010 they finally found Sir Gabriel Archer buried under the Jamestown Church. He's buried the opposite way that Christians are buried. I can't remember if you rise to the east or the west, however it is. He's buried opposite, and he was buried with a little reliquary on him. This little lead box that when they x-rayed it, it's got fragments of bone, fragments of parchment, and a little vial of liquid. So turns out that Sir Gabriel Archer was a crypto-Catholic or something of the sort in a time where this was James the First Protestant era. Like you were getting hung, you were getting run out of the country if you were a Catholic. So not only was he this secret Catholic, but the people over here in 1607 knew about it enough to where they buried him with those kind of Catholic honors. Anyway, Tree of Life. These 6 buildings and the sunken garden were created during the Rockefeller renovation, and the guy that they had, the architect that they had design this area and these buildings was a guy named Charles M. Robinson, a master mason from Virginia, built a lot of buildings, including the mosque, or it's now the Altria Theater in Richmond, which at the time he built it in the 19-teens or 20s was the largest Masonic meeting hall in all of North America. And also, while he happened to be here in Williamsburg, the original 1700s Masons Lodge, the number 6 lodge here in Williamsburg, was just gone. It had they had moved to another building, and he rebuilt it with his own money and then gifted it to the Masons in town. So I find this Tree of Life where the first Sephiroth is here at the Creme del Pond. The next one is here at this geological garden. You've got pillars 1 and 2, and then they end with the original building being the crown or Kether, right? What's cool is that these 2 pillars on the Tree of Life represent the feminine on the left and the masculine on the right. And the female housing was originally on the left in these left 3 buildings, and the male housing was in the right. And then the whole point there is at Kether or crown on the Tree of Life, it is a marriage of the masculine and the feminine. And what better name or point for the crown Sephiroth than a building that is named after King William and Queen Mary, literally the masculine and feminine crown. So there's that. And since I got this kind of idea from Oak Island, and there's a ton of connections between Oak Island and William and Mary, including the same trees were the first trees cultivated on the campus were the same trees that were cultivated at Oak Island, and what gave it its namesake. The governor who developed William and Mary, Francis Nicholson, was also the governor of Nova Scotia directly after being the governor of Virginia. And he had a short period as the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The person who succeeded him after he left the Massachusetts Bay Colony to become the Virginia governor was a guy named Sir William Phipps, who was a privateer pirate who was responsible for salvaging 6 tons of silver from the Concepcion treasure galleon in the Caribbean. And he was supposed to get all the silver off of this sunken ship and take it all to England. Well, he only showed up with 3 of the 6 tons and said that they couldn't get it all off. And when they went back, they couldn't find it. One of the best theories at the Curse of Oak Island that's been put forward is that the silver, the 3 tons of silver that was missing from the Phipps expedition ended up there. And so I always found the connection interesting that the governor, who was the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, where Phipps was out of, was the governor when Phipps went on his expedition. And then Phipps replaced that governor, and that governor came down to Virginia, became the governor of Virginia. And then after being the governor of Virginia, went up to Nova Scotia. And then the only thing we know about Francis Nicholson's family is that he had a sister and that she lived in Canada and her last name was Phipps. So that's interesting. So I drew a line coming from this Sephiroth through the Crown Sephiroth and wondered where it would end up. And it ends up in Nova Scotia and directly on Oak Island. Not only does it end up on Oak Island, but it touches a massive boulder that they've proven to be hand-hewn boulders that create, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them that create what they call Nolans Cross. And so coming through those 2 Sephiroth and going to Oak Island, you land directly on one of the boulders of Nolans Cross. So of course I was like, well, maybe there's a Nolans Cross configuration at William and Mary. And so the first thing I did was look up the dimensions of Nolans Cross, and it's 145 feet from the first point. There's a really weird statue that sits right in the middle of the Wren Yard, and it is Lord Botetourt. Lord Botetourt was a very early Mason at the number 6 Lodge. He built, commissioned and had built the Worshipful Master's chair that still exists, and you can go see. This statue had originally been placed at the Capitol building and then moved to William and Mary, and then hidden for a little while during the Revolution, and then again during the Civil War. Some guy cut its head off at some point, but it's always come back to this specific spot, which is exactly 145 feet from the front door of the original building. The other thing was each of these arms of the cross are 360 feet. It's exactly 360 feet from the door to the edge of these oldest roads in basically in the country. Now, what's weird was when I found Nolans Cross, I didn't put it together with the originally I didn't put it together with the Tree of Life. And when I did the Tree of Life, you can kind of see you've got Tree of Life should have 10 Sephiroth, and then there's a hidden Sephiroth. Okay, so all the buildings represent a Sephiroth, right? But then there's a Sephiroth that's supposed to land right here and right here. And so when I did the Tree of Life, I was like, oh wow, they cross in the exact spot. Well, you can see on Nolans Cross that there's a boulder here and there's a boulder here, and from the cross section to the first to E, it's 429 feet. Well, it just happens to be exactly 429 feet to where these 2 lines of the Tree of Life cross. And then it's 293 feet from E to F. And it's exactly 293 feet from this Sephiroth here to this Sephiroth. And you'll see later on, once all my crazy Charlie Day strings get on here, everything crosses through the middle, through this Sephiroth, which is Tippereth, which means beauty. So then I ran
all this together by yourself.
I did. I'm a psychopath.
What the fuck
Yeah.
is
Well, it's
this?
been like-
This is crazy.
Yeah. It's been like 8 years of me just picking apart. And I was, I've been a chef.
He's lying. He did this shit in 2 weeks. He's like autistic.
I mean, just all these little diagrams you made and like all the connections and stuff. Like,
I was like, yo, I would not
I'm-
have the patience to even make these lines. I just fuck this.
my
I,
God, it's
I had to
really
put something-
impressive.
Doing
I
them is
got-
not the crazy part. It's what the measurements actually
Yeah.
end up coming out to be in all those intersections. Because the
Wow.
first time he showed me some stuff, I think we were at one of his restaurants and he was doing some measured lines on Google Earth, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. But this has gone crazy, and not crazy in a lunatic way, but it's like, how could you deny the overlaps and the measurements and all these things? It's absolutely fascinating.
I agree. There's no denying it. I mean, it's
Oops.
pretty crazy.
How do I do this? There we go.
So the next thing, so one of the early episodes that me and Daniel did, because I ran across a bunch of measurements on the campus of William and Mary. Just about every monument is laid out on a scale of 666. So like every measurement is 666, which of course means one thing to one group. Personally, for me, it means what it means because I come from a Christian worldview. But then, of course, with Masons who are putting all this together, and they've kind of fetishized Solomon, and so it means a whole lot of things to Solomon, including the 666 talents he was paid in tax, the Star of Renfan, and so one of the early podcasts that we did is we started going around and measuring things on the campus, and we came up with just dozens of 666 measurements. But the most interesting one,
when you say campus, just to clarify,
yeah,
what kind of campus is, like, people go to school here, or like
so this is technically it's the second oldest college in the country.
It's a college. Okay.
Yeah, it's the College of William and Mary, and it was actually planned in 1618, and so had they been able to get their crap together and build the building, they'd have been the first. But Harvard technically beat them with a crappy little building before. But this building right here, the Crown or Kether, the Christopher Wren building, is the oldest the oldest college building that's been in continuous use in the United States. Second oldest college in the United States. It's an Ivy League school. It's what they call a public Ivy, where Yale and Harvard are private schools. William and Mary went public part of the way through its existence, and it's an incredible school, incredible law school, right in the heart of and this is where I grew up. I grew up right down the street from here. So
is there any type of, tell me to fuck off if you don't think so, but are there any type of rumors about like some sinister stuff running through this school?
Well, this school has the highest suicide rate of any campus in the country. It is the most haunted campus in the country.
It is.
You can see on foggy nights, you can see this building right here, the one that I talked about that the road runs right up against. That's called the Brafferton building. And it was basically an indoctrination school for Native Americans. They originally, they basically treated it almost Game of Thrones style hostage. Like, we're going to take... They go and they'd steal kids from tribes, and then they put them in this school under the guise of teaching them Christianity and how to speak English. And if they did that, they had some reassurance that this area wouldn't get raided, because they basically had hostages. And they did it by force in the beginning, and then they changed it to basically running it into a program which was, you know, a give and take of we're gonna teach your kids, don't shoot us up kind of thing. And so on the sunken garden here in the middle on foggy nights, tons of people have reported seeing like Native Americans like dancing and things like that. I mean, the head of Blackbeard is seen floating up and down Duke of Gloucester Street. Yeah, it's, you know, I can't put my finger specifically on anything super like nefarious, other than this was a very early place where they imbued with Masonic symbolism, and I do believe that Masonry is just the next step in kind of a control system that was laid down by, you know, bloodline families that, you know, needed to rule over people. And I really think it was just a rebranding for the Stuart dynasty and a new way of holding control. So there's that. So me and Daniel started measuring the campus, and it's 666 feet halfway through here, 666 feet to here. It's the same way all the way around. And we just had this triangle, but I had always noticed there's a road that runs down here and a road that runs down here. And there's a special symbolism within Masonry about a diamond next to two triangles. I can't remember what it was. We looked it up. But what we found interesting was they bent these buildings to stay with this. These two triangles here are exactly 666 feet by 666 feet by 666 feet, which means that this triangle is completely encoded with other triangles that are 666 feet. And I was like, I don't even know if that's a thing, but I did find it interesting that, of course, the dead center of it lines up right with that Sephiroth of Tippereth. And so I started looking up esoteric meanings of triangles within triangles, and I ran into something I'd never heard of before, and it's called the tetractys, or the tetrad, or the tetractys of the decad, which is a Pythagorean used in the for the Greeks. It was used in the secret worship of Pythagoreanism, which was a thing I didn't know. It was a cult around the Pythagorean teachings. And then also that Kabbalah uses the exact same symbol to also represent the tree. It works in conjunction with the tree of life. And so I started learning about the tetractys. And when I came along to, so each of these rows, you can kind of see here that with the Greeks, it's a point, and then 3 points, and then 4 points. And it's specific in both Pythagorean occultism and then in Kabbalah. But each of those rows have meanings. And so the first row has a meaning. I'm trying to remember. It's the third row. And I can't see it because the little slide thing is in my way. But it means beauty. The third row means beauty. And I didn't realize this until I was doing a podcast on this, and I went back to the tetractys and realized that the third row of the tetractys here at William and Mary runs directly across this line. You got 1, 2, 3, which makes it the third row, and the very center point of the third row sits right on the Sephiroth, that means beauty, on the tree of life. And then, of course, this line of the tetractys means beauty in conjunction with the tree of life. So running off of those,
this is fucked up. I can't believe this.
Running off
crazy.
Running off these same 666 measurements. This sunken garden, which was built by that architect Charles M. Robinson. The exact measurement from corner to corner is 666 both ways, which also crosses coincidentally in that same Sephiroth. And then you've got this diamond here. So you go from the crown Sephiroth over to, there is a statue of the founder of the college, James Blair. That's 666 feet. Down to the bottom Sephiroth, which is the Crimdale Pond and Bridge, 666 feet. Right up here, you can't see him, but there is a little alcove and a statue of Thomas Jefferson, and he's actually facing and looking towards the Bruton Parish Church, which is up this way. And then it's 666 feet back. There's also there's a statue of James Madison, and then a statue of 3 statues of the Tyler family. The Tyler family were an aristocratic family in Virginia. Presidents, attorney generals, presidents of the college. They're still important around here, and there's 3 busts of them right here. It's exactly 666 feet from Madison to them. And what's really weird is if you stand in this court, equidistant between the busts of the Tylers and this building, there's a name for it, but if you speak out loud in this court, your voice is like disembodied. It doesn't sound like it's coming out of, it may just be just an architectural like anomaly, but they've noticed it, and there's a little plaque there talking about it. But if you speak out loud here, it sounds like your voice is coming back at you from like all around you. It's really strange. And then I also have a configuration where I believe that the entire campus is laid out to mimic a Masonic lodge, in that the Wren building would be the worshipful master, because this way is east, and this is where the worshipful master would sit. The first kind of academic building is over here on this left side, and that is where in the lodge the secretary would sit. And then the chaplain would sit to the left hand of the worshipful master. And this wing of the Wren building here is the Wren chapel. And then, of course, you've got over here on the right side, which would be, I'm thinking, the south side of a which and all of this is aligned to the same compass points. But over here on the right side of a Masonic lodge, you would have right here in the middle, you would have, in a lodge building, you would have the warden, either junior or senior warden of the South. And right where you would have that, you do have that statue of Thomas Jefferson, who was a Mason. And then what really clinched it for me was these guys over here, because the guy who sits outside, sword drawn, on the outside wall of a Masonic lodge is referred to as a Tyler. It's spelled Tiler. So literally in this same position, you have a family of Tylers sitting out here. And then also some of these buildings align with different points in the lodge. Also in the middle of the floor of the Tesseract floor of a Masonic lodge, right here is where you would have the altar, where the Bible sits, and the square and compass sits on the open Bible. Their altar is right in the middle, and then obviously with people sitting facing towards the inside. What's really interesting is that the Wren Chapel, which is contained in this wing of the Wren building, is set up like no chapel of its time. You know, chapel, you have a pulpit in the front, and then you have kind of stadium seating coming back. I mean, you've got the Bruton Parish Church a block away that is an example of that. It's not like that in this chapel. It's set up exactly like a Masonic lodge, where the benches are all facing inside towards the aisle. So you almost have a mirroring of this being a Masonic lodge, and then the whole landscape being a Masonic lodge. I think, maybe not. And then there's this weird lightning bolt, again, 666 feet from this Sephiroth over to this strange, there's a cemetery in the middle of the college, and it's a little cemetery for like 1 or 2 guys. A guy named Ewell, who was really important to the college, he opened it back up after the Civil War. And then again, 666 feet from him to Thomas Jefferson, and then again 666 feet from Jefferson to the Cremdell Pond. So I throw down the Oak Island Tree of Life, and then throw the Tesseract over or the Tetractus over top of it. And what's interesting is where I've got the Tetractys on Oak Island, you cannot put that size triangle on this island in any other direction. It only fits on this island in this way. So I was like, well, that could be something or it could be nothing. Except for, you know, again, it landed right here. The dead center of it lands right here on Tippereth, or the Sephiroth for beauty. And then I was like, well, let me find the center of the island. So I make my own little compass, and the exact dead center of Oak Island is right here in the center where Tippereth is and the Tetractys line of beauty is. And this is a true northeast compass. So again, so we've got the line that goes from the Williamsburg Tree of Life that runs all the way to Oak Island, which is here, but it keeps going. And you can see it runs through and keeps going. And where it ends up is in the north of London, and specifically on this piece of land, and specifically right over top of this thing called the Round Tower. And this building and this property is known as Bruce Castle. And so the Bruce Castle is named that because this land belonged to Robert the Bruce and the Bruce family of Scotland, of, you know, William Wallace Braveheart lore, right? So this land, they lost this land obviously when Robert the Bruce gains Scotland's independence. Also, Robert the Bruce family comes from French, the Norman French, who come from the Merovingian and the Plantagenets. This round tower here that is on this property, they believe is a well because it goes really deep into the ground. And also, this is the oldest. They don't know when this was built, but they know that this is the absolute oldest construction on this site. So it goes through there. And this is the only thing it hits in London. I have gone over this line with a fine-tooth comb, and it hits nothing else interesting. I thought for sure it was going to go over like a statue of Francis Bacon, or like, actually it does. It goes through one thing. The building that they filmed Hogwarts, it goes over that building as well. I don't think that means anything, but yeah.
That definitely means something to me.
So it keeps going, and it heads over. It goes straight through Istanbul, and finally it lands here in Antioch, which is Antioch, Turkey. And not only does it go to Antioch, a very significant point during the Crusades, but it lands directly on the front door of St. Peter's Cave Church. Now, this is the 1st century church that the apostle St. Peter preached in secret in. Okay. Not only that, during the First Crusade, the supposed discovery of the Holy Lance was found underneath the altar in this cave church. And I'm just going to read this real quick because it's a really interesting story. The very spear that pierced Christ's side on the cross could be found in the Cathedral of St. Peter in Antioch. The bishop, Anyway, this guy who was like a ne'er-do-well, the Crusaders were inside the fortress in the city of Antioch, and they were like besieged, and they were all going to die. And this kind of ne'er-do-well guy in the city comes to somebody, a bishop, and says that he has a dream that St. Andrew came to him and told him that they could find the Spear of Destiny, the Lance of Longinus, in St. Peter's Cave Church, and that would help them get out of it, right? So they go and they dig and dig and dig, and nobody can find it. And then this guy, Peter, jumps down in the hole and finds it immediately. Now, there was a bunch of people, it's documented that he jumped down there wearing only like a tunic, just a shirt. And actually the bishop that was there claims, he was like, I did see like a piece of iron in there, but I didn't think it was anything. And then he got down there and picked it up, and it was definitely the spearhead. So what ends up happening is so on June 28th, like I said, they were besieged, starving. Following further instructions issued by Peter Bartholomew, that's the dude, from St. Andrew, who guaranteed victory in another vision, the Crusaders sailed out of Antioch, were led by their best soldier, the Norman warrior Behemoth of Toronto, with the Holy Lance carried by Raymond of Algiers. Desperately weak from hunger, they were in an exalted mood, and some cried out that they could see celestial cavalrymen on white horses riding to help them, bearing white banners and led by St. George. In berserker frenzy, they sent the besieging Saracens packing and slaughtered many of them in flight. So that I believe that's where the kind of story of the Spear of Destiny, any army that carries it in front of it will not fail. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-da.
So Daniel,
That's a crazy.
I think you pretty
crazy
much
story.
fucked Daniel. We only got 20 minutes left. I'm joking.
All right,
No,
Daniel. Do you want to go?
That's it. You're gonna lay all that out there, and then
Yeah, that's it.
No,
man.
I mean,
I
then we just talk
I
about
talked for like
regular history
2
stuff.
hours on the last podcast and couldn't show any of those. So I wanted to get those out of the way for
it's funny.
posterity's
I'm
sake.
like, and this is probably what's gonna happen. People are gonna be listening to me. I'm like, yo, I should, since this is gonna go an hour, I should just make this part 2, and then I'll do the other one. It's a totally
I
different
think you
show.
did the other one in 2 parts too.
Yeah, this will be part 3, and I'll just do this. It's gonna be a separate show after this at this point. Fuck.
Journey part 3.
And it kind of
Yeah.
is, but this is kind of a fun, interesting, somewhat tie-in to some of the stuff.
You know what was awesome
but
about it
it's,
is that last time you really didn't want to go into it too much because you didn't have all the visuals.
Yeah.
Even
What?
if people, yeah, right. No, he didn't. We were even trying to get him to do it, and he really wouldn't. So now, like when people re-listen
hard,
to this,
man.
even though it was the old stuff, it's fucking 10 times more information now.
No, I can vouch for that. The first time he showed me some of the William and Mary measurements, as I already said, we were at the restaurant, and he pulled it up on his phone. He's like, "Check this out. These triangles, 666." When we did an episode about this recently, all this other stuff was new to me, and it was like I hadn't even seen that you'd laid all these other shapes and figures over top of things. It was pretty wild, but anyway.
Yeah, that was some wild shit.
All right, you want to get into the other thing?
All
right.
Should I do an intro?
You want to get into the boring, just lame, regular old history of something that happened?
But it's not. It's not.
Or
at
but
all.
did it? Because of course that was where we started with this episode. We were talking about topics that we were going to cover, and I said, since we're doing little known Virginia history, since I was 4 years old, a long time ago, I would go camping in the mountains of Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley, and there's a place where you cross over the mountains, and there's a little plaque commemorating what's called the expedition of the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe, which very basically was just an expedition set up in 1716, I think, by the then Virginia Governor Spotswood, trying to explore a new pathway into the western part of Virginia. So basically, as Virginia was being developed from the coast west, people were building settlements, plantations, et cetera, but the mountains were the ultimate natural barrier there. And people were always trying to find what is the easiest way to get over the mountains. We know the Mississippi River is out there somewhere. At this time, the English are very much feeling threatened by the French coming down from Canada from the north, or the Spanish coming up from the south. And they're trying to figure out the best way to get to the Mississippi River, which they know is there somewhere, to defend against incursions from the French or the Spanish. So Governor Spotswood just puts together this little expedition of, I guess at the time would have been considered sort of New World nobles anyway. They weren't notable in Europe and the Old World, but they would have been notable to people in Virginia. And they get a couple of rangers together, they get some pack animals together, and they set off from Williamsburg through Richmond out to a community called Germanna, and then that's sort of the last outpost of civilization as far as they're concerned. The only people who have been out farther than that in any real sense are rangers, and they set off for the mountains, and they ultimately follow a river up to this pass in the mountains, climb to the top, and they figure out this is the best pass to get over into what is now known as the Shenandoah Valley. But what is interesting about that, what I thought was interesting about it from the original historical perspective, was they had a guy that was with them, and this is where Ernie will come in later, but he was one of the officers on the expedition was this Huguenot, Lieutenant John Fontaine, and he sort of documented this whole trip. So that's how we know what happened on this trip. And there's lots of detail in his documentation. I mean, there's one day where a guy has his horse spooked and he falls off and he's bitten by a rattlesnake, and that guy's got to go back to base camp. There's documentation about what they ate every night when they stopped. These guys also drank like a shit ton. So they're constantly stopping and writing down everything that they consumed on the evening that they camped. And it's kind of funny to read because they'll talk about, we had 6 kegs of ale, and then we had 14 bottles of wine, and then we opened the sherry. And I mean, you're like, how in the world did these guys drink this much and then wake up the next morning, get on a horse in wool clothing, and then keep traveling west?
And that's what they documented the best. They keep like documenting the different liquors that they have with them, and it's preposterous. It's like,
yeah, it's really
cherry
strange.
punch and rum and like ale and champagne.
Nobody was dehydrated as a motherfucker
I'm
on
sure
this
they all were. I
voyage.
think
You would
everybody was
wonder,
dehydrated
again,
until, like,
how do they make this journey?
1910.
And they don't say anything about the people that are carrying all these things. They just talk about what it is that they're eating and drinking the entire time out there. But they finally get to the crest of this ridge. They take this pass up, which is now where the main road goes through the mountains still in Virginia, and that's where you can see this historical marker. But one of the things that struck me as most interesting about this story is people don't think about Virginia as a place where you might look over like an African savanna and see thousands of buffalo and thousands of deer and all of these wild animals just immediately visible to the naked eye from that distance. But that's one of the things that they talk about in this account of breaching the mountains, is all of this wildlife that was so abundant at that time. And also the Shenandoah Valley now is largely full of forest. There are a few remaining farms that are still farmed in that part of Virginia today, but at that time there were no farms. It was just a clean, clear grassland like you would see in a nature documentary of an African savanna. And that's something that we've kind of forgotten about in Virginia history that I always thought was interesting. But essentially they get to the top of this mountain, and Governor Spotswood has prepared a gift for all of the men that went along with him on this expedition. And it's a golden horseshoe encrusted with diamonds, as some accounts of the golden horseshoe go. There's some discrepancy about that as well. Nobody's ever actually seen one. There's one account from a family member who claimed that they remember seeing it from a great grandfather or whatever that had it in the home, and it looked like a golden horseshoe. It had some diamond or diamond-like studs encrusted onto it as well. But all of these things were given to each member of the expedition with a Latin inscription that read, "It is very pleasing to cross the mountains in this way." That is what the thing said. So, the guys eat and drink their way all the way up there. They find this pass through the mountains. They say, "Good job. We got to the top of the mountain range. We found the pass. Now we're going to go back home." They ate and drank all the way back home. And seemingly that's kind of where the story ends. Ultimately, knowing this route that transcends the mountains leads to further development in Virginia, but ultimately throughout the whole country, because when you have more immigrants coming from Ireland, Scotland, Germany, they generally arrive in Pennsylvania or New York, follow the Shenandoah Valley down through this area, and then disperse out into Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and so on and so forth out through the rest of the country. So this little expedition by this small group of people ultimately sort of broke open a lot of exploration to the west in the United States. So kind of pivotal for American history for some people. And that was sort of where I thought the story was interesting. And there you go. Somebody popped it into the chat, the original Latin translation there. If somebody's better at Latin than I am, they can read that. But
Yeah,
I
that
thought, well,
was
that's
me.
kind of cool. This is little
I was just gonna
known.
say, isn't that you?
Yeah, this is little known Virginia history.
Yep.
So that's kind of a cool story we should talk about. And then, I tell Ernie this is like one of these little known Virginia history stories we should talk about. And then he starts calling me like the morning we're supposed to get together and record this podcast. And he's like, dude, you're not going to believe all this other stuff that I found. And then I think that's where I'll flip it over.
I can almost hear him say that.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, when he said he wanted to do this one, I kind of took a cursory look at it and I was like, oh, there's not going to be anything in here. There's just a bunch of dudes.
It's boring. It's just real
got
history.
drunk on a trail, like, and then came home. But I got looking into it and I think it runs, deeper, considering the, year that they did it and what was going on around that time. But also, some of the things, well, one thing that they did in particular at the end of the journey, and then what the like kind of company became known as and was dubbed as, which was the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe, which was a really lofty name for a bunch of dudes who like went on a camping trip. Really lofty present to give these guys all these golden horseshoes. And when he was talking about discrepancies, and I'll talk about this in a minute too, but like, from what I've found, each of these horseshoes that he gave was different. And I've kind of tied that into the different jewels and the different degrees and the different offices of Freemasonry. And this all happens in 1716. And we know that 1717 was the year that the Grand Lodge of London was created, basically the year of the coming out party of Freemasonry. And so my overarching kind of theory on this is that this was almost the American coming out party, kind of the first Masonic ritual that happened. And I'll wait till the end to tell you what kind of solidified that for me. Again, because it's me and I feel like I've got to explain some history before I get into it, I'm going to burn through a real quick connection of these families and the people kind of involved. It's important to state that the connection between the Merovingians, the Plantagenets, the Stuarts, the Jacobites, the Huguenots, the south of France, and all those factions later connecting in the formation of Freemasonry. So sort of a line of succession of mysteries from biblical times to the Merovingians through the Stuarts and resulting in Freemasonry. And I think America as a free nation. Important to note that this line from Merovingian to Stuart, I believe, cared far less about religion as they did using religion and denomination to claim the divine right of kings and to maintain power. So we're still talking very early people in this colony. The governor who headed up this expedition is Governor Spotswood. He was the governor immediately after Francis Nicholson, the guy who went up to Nova Scotia. So it may not seem like it, but the south of France plays heavily into this, I think. You start off in the south of France with the Merovingians, and they're the people who claim the Christ bloodline and a divine right to rule. They're ruling the south of France between the 5th and 8th centuries. They get kind of infiltrated and taken over by the Carolingian dynasty, and that it was referred to the Carolingian dynasty because that's the dynasty that kind of gets solidified with Charlemagne. Contrary to popular belief, Charlemagne was also Merovingian. They say the Merovingian line stopped there, but it didn't, because Charlemagne's mother was the daughter of somebody. Anyway, he's part of the Charlemagne is part of the direct line of King Clovis I, which was the beginning of the Merovingian dynasty. And it's through his mother's side, which I find interesting because of the divine feminine aspect of the Merovingian mythos, right? And so it goes from the Carolinian dynasty into the Plantagenets. The Plantagenets were an English dynasty from 1100 to 1400. They claimed connection to the Merovingians through a figure. This is wild. I just learned this today. They claim it through a figure named Melusine, who is often depicted as
like Starbucks almost.
Huh?
I had somebody on who covered that goddess as possibly the Starbucks logo.
Really? Well, it is a female. It's depicted as a female dragon or serpent. Also a connection to the Carolinians through Charlemagne's daughter, who married Rorgon, an ancestor of the Plantagenets. Henry II and Edward I and Richard the Lionheart were all part of the Plantagenet dynasty. And what's interesting there is, again, I'm talking about the south of France, and this is an English dynasty that were kings and queens of England. But not many people know this, but Richard the Lionheart, the guy, the Crusader guy, the Robin Hood king, the dude didn't even speak English. He only spoke French, and he only spent like a month in England for the entirety of his rule. And he actually had nothing but shitty things to say about the country of England. He was just, it was one of those times when you're the king of like 3 or 4 places. Okay, so the Plantagenets, Rorgon. So the Plantagenets, they end up, because they are kind of a French-based English dynasty, they have control of La Rochelle, which is an Atlantic Ocean base. In the 1100s, the Plantagenets give that base to the Templars. That becomes the base for the Templars fleet, right? And it's said to be the place that the Templars sailed from in 1307 when they're outlawed by the French king and the Pope. It's La Rochelle in the south of France is the place that they supposedly loaded up all their treasure, whatever knights got away, and 18 ships, and they took off, never seen from or heard from again. The treasure that they may or may not have had is never seen again. The knights, they don't know where they went, and the ships are never seen again. So from 1100 to 1300s, this is just kind of an interesting aside, but it kind of rolls into the imagery of memento mori, and that's that during the Crusades, the Templars helped King Roger of Sicily, who was known as King Roger the Jolly, defend Sicily against Muslim pirates. So together, the Templars and the Knights of Malta came together using their fleets to protect Sicily from the Muslim pirates. And they flew a skull and crossbones that ended up becoming referred to as the Jolly Roger after King Roger the Jolly of Sicily. And then that kind of advances forward, and it lends some credence to the idea that possibly these rogue Templars who made it out alive kind of became the pirates from the 1300s all the way up through the golden age of piracy, or at least their ideals, their kind of egalitarian, vote on everything ideals. When you look at the Tortuga pirate republic and things like that, those things all smack of this kind of all for one for all Templar ideal. So then the Stuarts come into power. They begin in the late 1300s in Scotland, and then by the 1600s they finally get their first foot in the door with King James I in England. And this is really where some of my overarching theory of all my research in William and Mary and Williamsburg in America comes into play, because they had a hell of a time maintaining power. They had a hell of a time getting into power in Scotland. And, you got Robert the Bruce, who's a Stuart, and, he's got half the country has to die in the revolution against England before they finally win their independence. And then all the way up through Queen Elizabeth, they frequently had stronger claims to the English throne, especially considering, Mary, Queen of Scots, who Queen Elizabeth I, Francis Bacon's mother, had Mary, Queen of Scots' head cut off. And Mary, Queen of Scots had a much better claim to the throne because her mother was the sister of King, what was it? Henry VIII? Yeah. Whereas Queen Elizabeth was kind of the bastard daughter of Henry VIII's relationship with Catherine of Aragon, who he completely changed the religion of the country to be able to divorce so that he could bang Queen Elizabeth I's mom, Anne Boleyn. All right, blah blah blah. So the Plantagenet dynasty, which ruled England for 300 years, had Norman roots, which is, Viking roots, through the marriage of Geoffrey of Anjou and the Empress Matilda, daughter of King Henry I of Norman dynasty. While the Plantagenets are not directly descended from the first Norman kings, they inherited the throne through this connection. Speculated that when the Templars left La Rochelle with the treasure, they sailed to North America to hide it. Now, remember, there is a connection between the Stuarts and the Knights Templar. It's hotly debated, but I think there's decent evidence for it. In 1314, towards the end of the Revolution, Scotland trying to get its independence, in 1314, an unnamed cavalry came to the aid of Robert the Bruce when he was outnumbered to win independence. That cavalry, sporting a conspicuous Templar cross, caused so much fear to the English that they ran from the battlefield. This connects the Templars to Scotland, and specifically the Stuarts, who were in power later in England from 1603 to 1714, right around the time the folks with possible Templar connections started coming to the New World. Then you've got the Huguenots, which almost takes a turn, but I think it supports my theory that these, I believe the Merovingians in that bloodline was more occulted and did not care about Catholicism or Protestantism. I believe the people in their courts and their people, yes, they identified with these different denominations and whatnot. But if you look through the Stuart line, what you see is a Catholic, a hardcore Catholic monarch who outlaws all the Protestants, and then you'll turn around and get a Protestant monarch who's a Stuart, who's cool with the Catholics hanging around, but they're not going to be in power, and then vice versa all the way through the Stuart line. And I think that kind of shows that they did not, again, they didn't care at that level about their about that religion in particular. I think all they cared about was their divine right to rule, and I think the writing was on the wall for them. That they needed to find someplace else to maintain this line. So the Huguenots jump up in the 1600s, and they kind of, their base of operations is La Rochelle, France. So in this same place that the Merovingians, the Plantagenets, the Carolinians, the Templars are all in, this Protestant Calvinist group of French people pop up, and they're heavily in La Rochelle until Louis XIV makes it illegal to be a Protestant, and then they have to kind of scatter all over the world. And that's going on throughout the 1600s into the early 1700s. And then right around that time in the early 1700s, you end up with the Jacobite Revolution. Now you get the Glorious Revolution, where the Stuart kings are deposed, and they bring in King William and Queen Mary, and they become the monarchs of England, right? Well, Queen Mary was actually of the Stuart line, so she's still holding that Merovingian line, and so they're still in there, but again, they're seeing the need for maintaining their line somewhere else. That was a little bit quick of a lot of years of history there, but it was just to kind of, we're going to get into on this expedition, these connections between people from a lot of these different backgrounds, and I think it's important to connect all those backgrounds going all the way back to the Merovingian dynasty. So the guy that Daniel was talking about, who recorded everything on the journey, was a guy named John Fontaine. He was only 23 at the time of the expedition. He kept detailed journals, which were later published by a descendant, but only in part. She held back, or so it said, she held back large portions, and people don't know why, of the 1716 expedition. They were a Huguenot family. John Fontaine comes from a Huguenot family that fled France before his birth to England, where he was born, and then to Ireland. Now, while they were in England, his father and brother were actually kidnapped by French pirates and held for ransom, and that's why they end up immigrating to Ireland for safety. And that'll come back in a really weird way later. He comes to Virginia, John Fontaine, in 1714 at the age of 23, supposedly to tour the country and buy a plantation. And we only know that from his father's autobiography. But his reasoning, like, again, he kept detailed journals of the journey over to America. He kept detailed journals of everything he did when he was in America, of the expeditions that he went on and whatnot. But he never in his diaries states the reason for coming to the New World. He spends only 4 years in the colony. And all but 6 weeks, he's in Virginia. He went to New York for 6 weeks to meet with the new governor. Now, this is a Huguenot refugee from Ireland who obviously has enough family money to just come over and buy a plantation, or so he said he was over here for, or what his dad said he was over here for. But he's not plugged in that we can see to the movers and shakers in the colony at all. But out of the 4 years, 6 weeks, he does go up to New York to meet the new New York governor, who happened to be a playwright and a general, and also happened to be kidnapped by French pirates on his way to become the governor of Virginia. But he was held by the French pirates so long that they got a new governor for Virginia. And then when he showed up, they're like, you could just have New York. But that's not the weirdest thing about this New York governor, because in 1715, he writes his first play, which is the first play to be written in the colonies. And it's about political rivals who have a secret society that meet in the basement of the New York governor's mansion, and they plot to kidnap him, the governor. That's it. That's all that's really known about this play. But it's just a ridiculous that this guy shows up in America and then cruises straight up to New York to chat with this guy who also was kidnapped by French pirates, who writes a play about secret societies. Okay, so when he lands in Virginia, he lands near Northumberland County on the Potomac, which is northern. He and the captain disembark and immediately go to church, right? And they just so happen to run into a woman named Mary Hughes, aka Mary Ball Hughes, who's the grandmother of George Washington, who was already a pretty important person in the colony at that time. And she just happened to be attending church outside her parish. She was miles and miles away from the church that she usually goes to. And she just happens to be at that same church, and just so happened to have brought 2 extra horses with her. So she invites the captain and John Fontaine back to her home at Cherry Point for dinner. They stay with her for the night, and then immediately the next morning get on a sloop and go straight to Williamsburg. They land exactly at the back of William and Mary, where that creek is that I told you. Several different landings, but they decide to land right there. And they meet with Governor Spotswood. Again, this guy is kind of a nobody from all we can gather. He's a Huguenot refugee, and he immediately arrives in Williamsburg and gets an audience with the governor. Now, at this time, Spotswood, this is 1715, and Governor Spotswood has just been sent one of his cousins. Okay. Now, this is a time when William and Mary are the king and queen, and everybody's supposed to be Protestant, and the Stuarts are a thing of the past. Now we're in the Hanoverian dynasty, and everybody's supposed to love them, right? But Spotswood cousin gets sent to him because in 1715, the Jacobites, who were the followers of the Stuart line, they create a revolution, and it goes to hell, and everybody is kind of exiled and running for their lives. And Governor Spotswood, his cousin, gets sent to him to kind of hide. Well, he gets put in charge of this community called Germana by his cousin Spotswood as an overseer. Supposedly, Spotswood was embarrassed by his cousins and their involvement in the Jacobite Revolution. But again, he puts them in charge of this little colony called Germana on the outskirts, which ends up later on becoming base camp for this expedition, right? A couple months later, they send him the other cousin, which is the brother of the first one, George Hume, and he became a surveyor through William and Mary and goes straight to Germana as well. Now, Germana is interesting, this base camp that they start at, because it was basically an indentured servant work camp built by Governor Spotswood for a group of Protestant Germans from the Siegen area of Germany who were sent over in 1714, the same year that Fontaine came over, by a baron of Switzerland to mine for silver. I found a bit of a connection, and possibly like a money could have been a possible money laundering scheme for that Sir William Phipps silver treasure that they had to figure out a way to account for 3 tons of silver during the gold rush. That happened a lot, where people would steal a bunch of gold and then they would take it out to the gold rush, out to where they were finding all the gold, have it all melted down into bars, and then they could bring it back to the east and say, hey, we found this in the dirt. And so Spotswood creating this basically slave camp out in the woods, mining for silver. It seemed like a plausible idea to kind of, there's no evidence that they did. That's just an aside. This town or settlement lies on the Rappahannock River, 30 miles above the falls at Fredericksburg and 30 miles from any inhabitants. The Germans live miserably. According to legend, the Siegen area, again, where these Germans come from, according to legend, was the scene of the last stand of the final dozen Knights Templar, who were said to have fought to the death there in 1312 after 5 years of relentless persecution by Francis King Philip and continued by the Archbishop of Mainz. Now,
there's something I want to ask you real quick. Ernie.
Yeah.
I'll probably just have to interrupt you anyway, just to ask. No offense.
Yeah.
You just have so much shit anyway. Is there a church in New York that you might specify at some point that's like in New York City?
A
Because
church?
I was just wondering, because there was a church I covered in New York City that I think.
No, I don't know.
Why?
Tell me.
There was, I think there was some sort of order that I think you said ended up turning into the KKK.
The Knights of the Golden Circle. So these are two.
No, I think it was before that. Actually, it was something that was on another. That I covered a church in New York. I went there and it had catacombs.
Okay.
And it's just like around the same time of these dates you're mentioning, they were being built over there, and they had like these. They were like almost like they were called like militias to protect the church when there was issues with supposed people in the area not liking Catholics. Well, that's where it was. Okay. But I don't think Because what you said, I can't remember what it was. It was an order that you mentioned.
Well, right during that time,
associated with the church that was supposed to protect the church, but then 50 years later, it's turning into the KKK. So what the fuck is up?
Well, right during that time, you do have a Jacobite revolution that happens in New York. And guess who?
That was part of the situation. That's why I was wondering if it was
Absolutely.
just so weird how you talk
This
about
is
shit, and I'm seeing
this is around 1715
around this church.
It was kind of like a coordinated European Jacobite revolution, and then one pops off in New York. And actually, that same governor Nicholson, I forgot, he was the governor of New York at the time.
Yeah, see, the church in New York that I'm talking about is St. Peter's. So when you mentioned St. Peter's, that's why I was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. So it actually does make sense if you follow the through line that I follow, in that the Jacobites are Scottish. They follow this Merovingian line. There's a connection to the Templars, right? The Templars, there's a connection to Rosicrucianism, and then later on to Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Now, there's York Rite Freemasonry that is much more English, and then there's Scottish Rite Freemasonry that is much more Scottish, and then by way of the Scottish, American. Most of your Freemasons in America are Scottish Rite. That's like what we do in America.
There are like having all different denominations in religion.
Absolutely. But the Scottish Rite Freemasonry is more closely associated with the Scottish, with the Stuart line, and with those Jacobites. And then the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry is kind of revamped and overhauled by Albert Pike, the Confederate general, who also has a hand in the creation of the KKK later. So there is a line right there, bro. You see that, Daniel? He showed this on the last one. There's more tabs on there than pages, dude.
Yeah.
I read this book a lot, man. Like he said, there's more tabs on here than pages, man. I go through this like crazy because there's just a lot of information in there that's a lot of people don't really understand it.
No, it's wild. It's stuff that most of the time, if you tell a Mason something out of that book, they're like, no way. There's no way.
I've had that happen to me before.
What we got to with the first episode about the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe is thinking this is just kind of an unknown bit of Virginia history, as Ernie was ultimately able to kind of go back through all these different lineages and prove that there might have been some sort of proto-Masonic identity to this expedition. This was like maybe these guys were a precursor to the Masons. And a lot of the guys who were on the expedition, you can just go look up the original journal entry. It's online anywhere. If you just put in Knights of the Golden Horseshoe, you can find Fontaine's account of who was on there, and a lot of those guys were known to be Masons. And then I think,
well, not only that, most of those
contention, Ernie, was that they may have gone out there with something to hide something, or there was some other reason for going out there that may have been tied to the Masonic connection, not just going to, hey, let's go see if we can find a pass through the mountains, right?
Well, and I'm about to get into that. I'm going to finish up John Fontaine's thing. Again, most of this story, the story itself, there's not a lot of information about the expedition except for his journals. But it's the connections with the Jacobites and with the Huguenots, and those people coming together for something. And it's still not totally clear, but I think it helps create more of that connective tissue from the Merovingians all the way up to America. And so really this is more of a history lesson. But so John Fontaine, again, and when you look at like this Merovingian line and this Magdalene kind of ideal and the divine feminine, working with Governor Spotswood, who's supposed to be this Protestant, loyalist. So John Fontaine has this very strange life, comes over here. He leaves in 4 years. He goes on this expedition and basically leaves. He ends up living. He ends up living in Newchurch, Wales, which was always a Templar stronghold. That's where he dies. He marries a woman named Mary Magdalene Sabatier. So her name is Mary Magdalene, and then she's got a French last name, I'm sure, from the Huguenot connection, which is interesting. Originally, possession of his journals were published in 1853, minus large portions. The great-granddaughter of John Fontaine's sister, Mary Ann Fontaine, and Matthew Murray, Anne Murray, is the one who published them. Her father, James Murray, was the United States consul in Liverpool, England from 1790 to 1829. Another descendant of this family was Matthew Fontaine Maury, pathfinder of the seas, to whom a monument was erected on Richmond's famed Monument Avenue in 1929. I'm sure it's gone now. That was the you saw it, wasn't it, on the cover of Time magazine? That was covered in like graffiti and stuff. They removed all the statues from this street. Neither here nor there, but it is interesting. That is a huge that particular street. It's called Monument Avenue because every like 5 blocks there's a massive monument to somebody who was important to colonial or Civil War era South. And he was up there, and he comes from a Huguenot family that we don't know much about. Now, the horseshoe symbolism is common in Freemasonry. The golden horseshoe with jewels in it in Masonry. Okay, I'm sorry. So these pins that were given out to each of the captains, of all the accounts of people who have seen them are different. And again, I believe that they correspond. So some of them had rubies in them. Some of them had a mix of jewels. Some of them were just diamond studded. And in Masonry, different jewels correspond to different degrees. Eyewitness accounts differ. Some say they were a mix of different jewels. Some say they were garnets. While a man with the first name Bacon in the 1900s, who descended from one of the adventurers, claims to have held it in his hand as a child, and it was diamonds. Horses and horseshoes are associated with the Templars because of their base of operations during the First Crusade. During the First Crusade were the stables on the Temple Mount. The other thing that Daniel didn't get into was that once they crossed the mountains, they got to the Shenandoah River, and they didn't turn around and come back until they made sure that they crossed the river. They crossed the river, named the river the Euphrates, had a big, huge party, and then they left and went home. The river Euphrates appears in Freemasonry, particularly in the higher degrees, especially in those related to the ritual of the Royal Arch degree, which is a Scottish Rite degree. It's associated with the deliverance from the Israelites, specifically their crossing of the Euphrates. In the context of Freemasonry, the Euphrates signifies freedom and passage. And I can relate that to that need for the Stuarts and the Merovingian Jacobite line to create a free place to live and carry out their line.
I thought you actually got stuck there first.
No. So while it's clear that Spotwood was a Mason, or it's not clear if he was a Mason, we do know that his son Robert was. In fact, he was the worshipful master at the Fredericksburg Lodge, which is where George Washington was initiated. Again, this is really interesting too. The guy, William Phipps, who went and got all the silver. The name of his ship that he took was called the Rose of Algeria. The rose being a main Templar symbol, Algeria being the home of the assassin, who the Templars became buddy-buddy with during the Crusades, and the main base of Barbary pirates starting in the 15th century. Again, connecting pirates to Templars, to a possible Jacobite. Colonel Peter Fontaine Jr. was the surveyor of Bedford, Virginia. Colonel Peter Fontaine and Colonel Lytle Bacon, grandnephew of Bacon's rebellion, worked the same job together in Bedford and Lunenburg County, which is where the Beale treasure is contained. And the Beale treasure is this 1800s treasure that was a guy left 3 different ciphers with a guy who owned a tavern. The guy didn't open them up for like 40 years, and when he did, they were able to solve one of the ciphers. One of the ciphers, they were able to solve it by using the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was obsessed with Francis Bacon, including employing 3 people from the direct lineage of Francis Bacon at Monticello, his home. Thomas Jefferson himself was of the Francis Bacon line through the Randolph family. And yeah. Oh, also, like I said, Colonel Peter Fontaine, this is down the Fontaine line in Virginia, and Colonel Lydall Bacon, the nephew of Nathaniel Bacon of Bacon's Rebellion. They worked the same job in Lunenburg County, which is where the Beale treasure is. But Lunenburg County is also the name of the county that Oak Island sits in Nova Scotia. Another weird thing, there were 2 stained glass, the very famous powder magazine in Colonial Williamsburg, which is in the shape of an octagon, which Court Lindahl has done a lot of work to prove that it is a replica of the 4 Towers of the Winds in Athens, Greece. Inside of that powder magazine were 2 stained glass windows made by the Phipps Company out of Boston. Again, from the line of Phipps, the guy who stole the treasure, makes that family later on down the road makes 2 stained glass windows. One is of Alexander Spotswood, the guy who was on this expedition. The other one is of Nathaniel Bacon, the guy who started the revolution and the rebellion. So again, you've got these 2 seemingly disparate guys, Spotswood, who wasn't even in the colonies when the rebellion happened, and Nathaniel Bacon, who was kind of considered a traitor, and these 2 pieces of stained glass get made and get put inside the powder magazine, which is a replica of the 4 Winds of Athens, right down the street from the Capitol building in Williamsburg, which is spelled Capitol, after the Capitolium in Athens, Greece. That is where ball worship happened. The Capitolium on one of the hills of Rome, where child sacrifice happened. But the Beale, Phipps, Bacon, and Fontaine genealogies are just like an insane mashup in all of those counties in Virginia. And so I'm basically done. And like I said, this story of them crossing this mountain, naming the river the Euphrates, having a big ass party, and then coming home and giving all these guys a bunch of jewelry, and then calling themselves this really lofty name, the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe. None of it really had to do with the trip. I believe that it was this galvanizing experience through Masonry, which I see to be the last step of the Stuart line. This, when you look at the Grand Lodge of London in 1717, you look at the guys who are involved in the founding of that. It's Royal Society members, including one of them who took Nathaniel Bacon on a tour of Europe. Christopher Wren, who the College of William and Mary is named after. Moray, who comes from the Earl of Moray in Scotland. The Earl of Moray was a Randolph, that's the direct line to Thomas Jefferson. And was also he took care of, I believe, James the First as a child, who is of the Bruce line in Scotland until he was of age to be able to rule. And what I see is the Stuarts coming from the Merovingians through all these different families and lines, and then still continuing to maintain that bloodline. And once they came over to America, realizing that Europe wasn't the place for them anymore, they kind of used this new thing that was influenced by the Templars, Freemasonry, which is in itself a really perfect control structure and a system of keeping secrets. And then you just look up to present day how every Mason in the country is generally a Scottish Rite Freemason. So da. That's all I got.
It wasn't just a camping trip, apparently.
Yeah.
Freemason fingerprints on everything.
Yeah.
Well, these are fear. Yeah, these.
It was a
pictures.
bougie
It's
camping
Oh yeah.
trip.
some Scottish Rite shit.
Yeah, cool.
Really.
I also have
How old
some
are those?
notes and stuff that I did some digging into the whole thing, and I got some notes in
Yeah.
the background.
Please.
I
How
got
old are those?
to hold
pieces?
those. Those are at my local.
Oh, you're breaking up.
Those are, I believe, early 1800s.
You're good.
Sorry, hang on one second.
Screwing up again.
All right, those are early. Damn it, new headset. So bear with me.
There you
Is
go.
that any better?
I think so.
I think there's just a delay
Okay.
on like video.
Those are like
Oh, shit. Damn.
Bro, the Masons
Okay.
are glitching
those
us
are
again.
early 1800s. I got.
Let me take down the images.
I know, right? Those are at my local antiques.
Yeah, they keep cutting him off on my side.
How about now? Can y'all hear me?
Nah, it's breaking up, bro.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
breaking up
Now?
every time you keep talking.
Sorry.
Damn.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that happened to me last time. Right around,
Oh yeah, you remember?
right around the same time, dude.
Every time.
Like, at the same time.
We're getting too deep.
Fuck.
Any
I
All right,
question?
hang on one second.
was gonna
Let
say
me.
something.
Okay, go ahead.
All right.
Try to bring it
I
up.
don't know if y'all can understand me or not. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we
Nah,
can
it's,
hear you now.
oh, it's still breaking up on my side.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, you're frozen.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, you're frozen, bro. It ain't gonna work, bro.
They're at my local antique store, and they're son of a.
Sounds exactly like the last time I
Well,
was
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah. Sorry, dude. That sucks. Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah, turn off. You know what you might want to do? Turn off your camera and just leave the mic on. That might actually work.
You'd also pop it in the chat and have somebody else read it.
Yeah, put it in the chat.
Yeah. But
how's that? Is that any better?
Think
Just a
so.
little bit.
yeah, I think so. You sound okay now. No, see, there's a glitch probably.
Okay.
You would-
Well, let me try this again. All right. Well, there it was at my local antique store. It's still there. It's $300 a set. They're early 1800s, and like it's just it was amazing that they were even there. Like you never see that shit anywhere. So I'm saving up $300 in my penny jar so I can go back and buy them. Hopefully they're still there. But I got to hold other things. I got to hold the first English translation Bible from 17 something, whatever
Whoa.
fuck it was. And yeah, I have pictures of it. I can post it up, but like, holy shit, like this thing was frail. It was beautiful. And the condition, she wanted $2,000 for it. And there was a recent one that went out for auction. It was $5,000, but the condition was so much better. But literally it was the first one. And I also got to hold the first. It was also 1716 Bible. And like,
Wow.
yeah, that thing was thick as shit too. But yeah, fucking A. But those Scottish Rite books, like, holy crap, looking at the images on the inside of that, it's all confusing as shit. But like anyone who's learned or has the basics of the knowledge of them, like you can get it. You can understand it. I did a little digging into the Masonic connections. Hang on, just from John Fontaine, Robert Beverly Jr., Major Williams Woodford, all of them. There were certain ones that were like names that were familiar to me, and so I was like, let me see if there's Masonic connections, and there is. But however, next to the Golden Horseshoe, they're not a Masonic brotherhood.
Well, that was
they
too
mirrored
early.
themselves after the Knights of Templar and the Masons themselves.
Yeah, it was
Exactly.
it was technically too
Alexander's
early. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's still a delay on your end, Fear, but
I got a whole, like, all of them. Just yeah, there's about like a 6-second delay. I'm not sure, but yeah, most of them are all like either or just like they have direct lineage of bloodlines of these other brotherhoods.
Yeah.
you know, one thing you started making me think about. I don't know why I didn't catch it earlier. You know, like even with the
I land my plane there.
oh shit, I figured he was done. Fuck it. The Society of Cincinnatus. They had a French. You know, was there anything? Did you come across any of that? Because I know like they have like French connections. Like, there was a lot of French Freemasons.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the specifically the Huguenots were instrumental in the founding of the Grand Lodge of London, and then they have, you know, over in France they have this entirely separate French Freemasonry that generally has like a, from what I can tell, sort of a darker, more occulted, less shiny, squeaky clean like image. In the Society of the Cincinnatus, I hear it so much and it's so intriguing, but I haven't jumped into it yet. I do know the basics, that it was Revolutionary War officers were handpicked to be a part of it, and then sort of after that it gets kind of murky. I mean, there are people that we know are a part of it, but it's not a very
Jacqueline Kennedy.
Really?
Bouvier, her last name, Bouvier. She
Makes
was
sense.
part of it. And there's actually some couple serial killers who are descended from like weird French families who were part of the society. And just a fun fact, since we're talking about Virginia, you know, William Colby, that led like the Phoenix program and stuff. He was actually from Virginia. Spent a lot of time in Virginia. Ted Bundy's family was from Virginia.
John Hinckley.
Yeah, a lot of weird stuff.
I've been in his parents' house.
That's crazy. Yeah. But it's such an old place and it has so much history. Like you could go so many different ways with it.
It's like I tell everybody, I have a list of all the things that makes Virginia a crazy, conspiracy rich place. We have everything from the deep state up north with DC, and then we've got the Langley up there. We've got the CIA up there. We've got more defense contractors, more aerospace contractors, more CIA, more FBI than any other state. We have more UFOs. We're in the top 3 of UFO sightings for the whole country. Something that you don't hear, like you always think like out west and like
I think
like
other than California, the obvious ones.
We have more military personnel in this state than any other state except California. We've had John Wilkes Booth. We had John Hinckley.
We've had more presidents until
we've had more presidents than any. All of them Masons. So we run the gamut from deep state, aerospace. We've got our own. We've got several serial killers. We've got the Parkway murders, which we did a podcast with Blaine Pardoe, who's a New York Times best-selling author who basically discovered who the killer was. It was a cold case for years, and actually a few years after he published his book, the guy that he thought did it died in his house, and so the police were able to take DNA, and it matched with one of the sets of victims. We've got Camp Perry here, which is generally referred to as the farm. That is the most covert CIA base in the country. That's where they do what they call bond training. So it's like how to flip a car, how to drive a speedboat, torture and interrogation, and how to withstand those things. Like it's wild. Like I grew up in Williamsburg where Camp Perry was, and I can't tell you how many like friends of mine, I'd be like, what does your dad do for a living? And they'd be like, I don't know, he works at Camp Perry. And I'm like, so he's in the CIA? And they're like, no, I don't think so, but I don't know what he does.
We also have a very strong connection to the early American eugenics movement. I mean, there's so many things. It just goes on and on.
I mean, the
I guess
Rockefellers
that's where you
got their
get from being
fingers
kind
here.
of first in a way.
Yeah. We're the largest naval
Found
base
out
in the
all
entire world. The only thing I can't find is cults. I've been searching for a good cult story.
Well, somebody just put one in the chat.
Yeah.
The Finders cult had
Well, yes.
a farm in Virginia.
I am trying desperately. I got put in contact. He hasn't responded to me, but my friend Robert Frederick put me in contact with William Ramsey because I really want to do a Finders Cult episode with somebody who's more like I know about it from listening to podcasts, and it is. And I think the Finders Cult is involved with the Process Church and with the Atlanta child murders and all that stuff. Like it gets deep. And that all happened they were up in Virginia. The one cult I did find, and it's kind of lame, but we might do a podcast where we just do small little short nuggets of weird stuff in Virginia. I haven't even told Daniel about this, but I found a cult that began in the 90s, and it was based on the Lord of the Rings. And they were a full-off breakaway that like bought all this land and named the whole. You can still go up to the neighborhood, and all of the streets are named after. They were like a super conservative Christian cult that was also.
Dude, but why didn't you say anything? Because I started that one.
Did you?
Yeah. I mean, you didn't even mention that. I could have given you all sorts of information on that.
No shit.
No, you hadn't mentioned it yet, but that's a pretty good one. What was the other one you were talking about with like it was an observatory? We've discussed doing an episode on this. It was it's a house out in Western Virginia in the mountains. Swananoa.
Yeah, that was built by the same people who built the Maymont property in Richmond, the Toolies, who were the most, like we were talking about before the podcast started, were like the most philanthropic rich family in the Richmond area, and I always assume that there's something shady, but I cannot find anything on them. But they built this house in on Afton Mountain in the Blue Ridge Mountains called Swananoa, and it has all this swan imagery all over it. And I've been looking into the Swan Knights, or the Order of the Knight of the Swan, and this swan imagery pops up through all the different little g god like mythologies and pantheons. Like I think Zeus banged a swan, and that got I believe that begat like Athena or something like that. But anyway, so they have this place Swananoa, and then the Department of Naval Intelligence tries to buy it right after World War II, and they don't end up getting it. But this dude, William Russell, I believe his name was, or Russell William, I can't remember. This dude who's, if you go on any of these like energetic ether, like Electric Universe authors and stuff like that, they talk about this guy forever. Him and his wife bought it, and they started this like philosophical college out of that place that still exists today. It's like crazy haunted. Anyway, yeah. So now we're just rambling about weird Virginia stuff.
Interesting place. Did anybody have anything to add about all the stuff that you just said before?
I was just going to say, I'm going to start looking into seeing what kind of cults are out there now. That's what I'm going to start digging into, because I want to see if the religious backgrounds on them and stuff like that. So that has me interested.
Zeus turned into a swan and banged Leda. And that's
somebody put that in the comment over here.
Yeah.
Well, I would give your listeners maybe some homework, because I told Ernie about this when we first did the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe podcast. I swear I read this at some point, and I could not I couldn't dig it up and find it, but that there was a link too between the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe and the Knights of the Golden Circle, which
the Knights of the Golden
ended up being a very different thing. But there was a connection I read about at some point that the Knights of the Golden Circle.
There was a book written about the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe in the 1800s, right before the Knights of the Golden Circle became a thing. And I think between Masonry and the imagery of the Knights of the Golden Horseshoe, his name was Captain Bickle was the guy who started the Knights of the Golden Circle.
Yeah, that's a great name.
Yeah.
It started down here in Texas, and it's also linked to John Wilkes Booth and the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
But there was some, because a lot of times people get the two mixed up.
Yeah.
But there is actually, I read about it at some point, there is a connection there somewhere. So if anybody can find that and pass it along to us, that'd be great. Because I'd love to know where I read that before and get it back and do some digging on that.
Well, I think we did it.
Yeah. No, definitely. One thing I do want to leave, if you do like seriously ever look into that Cincinnati stuff, I really do suggest looking into the French area because I remember I had a book. I was supposed to do something like on that topic, and I had notes, and I never got to use them. But I did have stuff, and I think I erased it. Whatever. I found stuff with like not a lot, but enough people from France. But there was enough that I found interesting, and you hear a lot about it, and it's always like, with them coming over here. Some of the French ones did, but it's just like there's more, I think, to be looked at with them right now.
Yeah.
Not saying like, not paying attention to what's going on in the United States with them isn't important. It's just, I think that side of it seems to get left out.
I think our connections to France are just, I
think it's a lot huge. I think that's a lot bigger than most people think.
I think it's a lot bigger than, we all know that their involvement in the revolution, helping us out and whatnot. But, again, Thomas Jefferson is one of my favorite / most hated figures in Virginia history. But he, a lot of our early, like our founding fathers really kind of fetishized the French. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. And it was kind of a love-hate thing, because then there was the other half of the founding fathers who were like, I don't want anything to do with the French. But I think we took a lot of, the French Enlightenment and stuff like that. We took a lot of ideals from them, and I think them from us.
There's a great book out there called The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution, and it's all about that.
Really? There you go. Leave it to the master's degree.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, Julie, did you have anything you wanted to ask her, Ed, or you good?
Well, I feel bad that I wasn't able to add more to this one. It kind of felt like I was going through the real life history of like National Treasure and National Treasure Book of Secrets. Both of those have a lot of stuff. That the second one talks a lot about Albert Pike and like a bunch of weird stuff. So it kind of felt like I was going through the real life version of that, but no, super interesting.
Thanks.
I haven't looked into the bloodlines as much as you guys have, obviously, but I do find it highly fascinating.
It can be overwhelming, because just looking at that short history of connecting the Merovingians all the way down to like the Jacobites, it's crazy overwhelming. And so people mostly they focus on just the Merovingians or just the Charlemagne folks or just the Stuarts. And they'll talk about, and it's even hard to find the connections when you're researching it, because all of those individual dynasties are so huge, and there's so much information there and so much hidden information there that it's hard to look at them all as a whole, especially for me. I'm a dum.
Yeah, no, the information is dense, and the one that I do always talk about is Meghan Markle, because she's a descendant from Robert the Bruce. And there's a lot of weird stuff with Robert the Bruce and the Ark of the Covenant, actually, which is a whole nother episode that, I could talk about for hours. But yeah,
that stone that was stolen from Scotland, and that's where they I don't know, inaugurate their kings and queens sitting on top of that rock.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and I know like the periphery of it, but I never like sat down and went down the line. Something that I probably
I think most people don't because their eyes glaze over. But Ernie somehow has like managed to try to trace the family tree of so many people. It's quite fascinating to me because I don't have the patience for it, But that's one of the
I don't think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I wish it translated to like, cash or something.
You solved the puzzle, you win a prize, right?
Yeah, right.
But it was a super fascinating episode. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah, but thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll let everybody, I guess, plug their stuff, and we'll wrap it up. Julia, let everybody know where they can find all your amazing work.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so I have Cosmic Peach podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and an occult reject whenever Nick will have me on. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Of course. No, thank you very much, Julia. Always appreciate you here. Tyrone, what is up, my man? Please let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, just like Julia said, thanks for having me, Nick. You let me be part of the Occult Rejects. You told me that today, so I appreciate that, man. Everything that you want to read about me or find out about me is on my website, rebirthoftheword.com. I also have a book on Amazon, Journey Through the Origins of History. So, yeah, check it out. And thanks again, Nick. Appreciate it.
No, thank you. I appreciate you, Tyrone. And Fear, if you want to try to unmute yourself and maybe get out a goodbye, that might work.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for having me on here again. And I'm going to work on my connection, trying to figure this shit out. But for now, what I got in the making is, like I said, rocks, ruins, and recipes. And I'm currently working on the cookbook. So Bolo on that. Be on the lookout. And you can find me on Twitter. The Twitter handle's right there on the screen. And other than that, yeah, I'm just going to be reading my books in the background. And thank you
very
again.
much. No, thank you. And again, sorry about the connection, bro. I feel really bad, but hopefully next time when you're on, it'll be a better connection. And Daniel, what is going on, sir? Let everybody know what's up.
You can't find me too many places online these days, but I will be playing for the Indianapolis Colts this year when the season starts, now that I've left New York. Yeah. So you can find me wherever Ernie says you can find us. That's
Daniel Jones photo. He's a super talented photographer. Super talented. And then again, Virginia is for conspiracy lovers, and just try all forms of that. And, VA con lovers, Virginia con lovers, podcast, different variations. You'll find us probably.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate both of you. That was an awesome show, just like last time. The images was great. Like, I'm really glad that you did bring that back. Like I even said, for people who might rehear it, you just went a lot more into it with the visuals. So even the audio people, I still think you're going to hear a lot more than he left out, from this time. So I do appreciate that. And everybody in the chat, that's what's up. I saw a lot of returning people, a lot of there from the beginning to the end. Saw some people I haven't seen in a while pop back up. That's what's up. Nice to see you come back again. And thank you all for coming on. I really appreciate you all making the time. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.